Welcome back to Truth Hurts, where we expose corrupt politicians, align corporate media. I'm Jake Duesenberg, your host, broadcasting live from Roseville, Minnesota, in the belly of the beast, the liberal zombie apocalypse of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I got a really good show for you guys today. If this is the first time you're watching it, I try to bring on guests on these Tuesday and Thursday live shows. Otherwise, we do videos kind of breaking down politics, things that you're probably not seeing from other media outlets. Try to stay focused on Minnesota stuff, but recently, how can I avoid the federal issues, especially when they actually impact us Minnesotans? Our sponsor today is Alpine Cabinetry in the great city of St. Cloud, Minnesota. It's also brought to you by EliteGuardianMN.com. I just realized I probably should show you guys how to get to my Minnesota Permit to Carry course. So here we go. We got it right here. Go to EliteGuardianMN.com. You click on Minnesota Permit to Carry class. I've got a ton of classes coming up right here. All you got to do is sign up for one of these in-person classes. It's a 4-hour block, or you could do a virtual class where you have them on the next 2 Sundays from 6 to 8:30 p.m., and then you'll just schedule a time later to do the in-person pistol training. Now, the reason I do these is because it's not one, if you want to carry in Minnesota, it's a legal requirement that you do until we change that terrible law. But number two, I think it's important for people to understand how to use a pistol, because the only way to protect a good person is, or protect against a bad person with a gun, is to have a good person with a gun. And I know you believe that, Rebecca Whiting is one of my guests that have been on the show more than one time. You ran the Libertarian Party of Minnesota, and then you just recently announced you're running for the U.S. Senate in an open seat being vacated by Tina Smith, in a race that's got a lot of people on the Republican side energized. Mm-hmm. And on the Democrat side, you've got Angie Craig and completely woke Peggy Flanagan. So tell people who you are and why you're running for this position.
Well, I am, a mom of a large family. That's kind of like my number one job right now. I wear a lot of hats. We also have a farm in Bemidji. I was finishing up chores and I had to make sure everything looked fine for this, because I milk cows every morning. I'm an Army veteran. I served in 2 tours to Iraq as a combat medic, 04 to 05 in Ramadi, 06, 07 in Baghdad. During the surge, I was in 2nd Infantry Division, spent a lot of time out, actually not doing a lot of pogue stuff. So did 7 years in the Army, got out, went straight into, family stuff and farm. I have a small business up here in Bemidji. I'm very into local foods, farm stuff, family farms, advocating for them. I've been on the board for our farmers market for 12 years now, I think. Just got voted back on last week. So looks like I'll be doing that for a little bit longer. And running for U.S. Senate, work with the Libertarian Party. I am the chair also of the Libertarian Party. So I also wear that hat, help with our issues throughout the non-election years. And that is defend the guard legislation, ballot access legislation, again, advocating for small farms at this level, with just deregulating small farms, because that's what's killing family farms, is the regulations and the laws. Mm-hmm. And then announced I'm running for U.S. Senate. Did it once already, and so now I'm going to do it again, and running on an anti-war, pro-human platform, really, looking out for the little guy, because there's not a lot of people that are actually speaking for us that come from this, from this level too. So coming from somebody who's, my hands are just as dirty as every other person. I guess it's not really middle class anymore, but, just trying to get the job done and advocate where, there's not enough people advocating,
Yeah. All right. Let me start with this. So I'm what you call a small L libertarian. I have probably the same views as you as a libertarian. Of course, my joke always is there's only about 57 libertarians, because we find many different ways to distinguish ourselves from each other.
That's true.
I think you're on the right libertarian side, whatever the hell that means.
Yeah.
But I'm a small libertarian in the sense that I've never been a member of the Libertarian Party of Minnesota or nationally. I've caucused with Republicans. I've never voted for a Democrat in my life, just FYI, before people get so insulted that I have a different opinion on the Iran war. Um,
Mm,
I've never voted for a Democrat. I despise the Democrat Party. I think the Democrat Party has no hope whatsoever. But what I thought was so fascinating about this is I'm at that point where like the Republican Party doesn't control my mind. You guys don't own me. You don't control me. I don't
mhm,
actually have to be a part of your organization. I can go to somewhere else. Or when it comes to voting, even if I vote, right? Because not everyone wants to vote, but even
mhm,
if I vote, you don't necessarily win my vote. There are other parties that get a say in it or other independent candidates. And quite frankly, everything I've seen from you, I really like, and you're probably my leading candidate right now.
Yay.
Unless you lose it today, let's see. Let's see how you do when we
Mhm,
discuss things. But I just want people to understand that we need to have an open mind. That there is a two-party system when we allow it to happen. Now, eventually,
mhm,
you get close to November, and the polling's not going to lie. It's not like the two candidates and the major parties are polling at close to 100%, and also libertarians are somehow going to get 30% of the votes. It's just not going to happen. There's no mystery like that, but it can happen, and the polling will
mhm,
suggest if you got traction. So I want a fair process and allow the voice to be heard. One other thing I want to say before we get into the subject matter, um, I thought it'd be really interesting to do this show with both you and Adam Schwarzy, who's running for the U.S. Senate as a Republican.
mhm,
And I didn't know Schwarzy's opinion on the Iran war, but what I thought was interesting is the three of us are all Iraq war veterans, right?
mhm.
Now he
Yep.
was a Marine, then ended up becoming a Navy SEAL. You
Mhm,
were an Army medic, and I was an Army infantry officer. I thought this would be a fantastic conversation. Hear me being someone that's open minded to voting anyway, right? Meaning Republican or Libertarian, not Democrat.
right.
No consistency. Just so people understand, there's no consistency on that side on these
Mm,
issues, right? Um, and so to hear both opinions and bring it out there, Adam was did get back to me right away when I offered it. He's just traveling, so hopefully we can make that work because I'm very interested. But I want to bring up my first thing I want to share was an article that came out in the Star Tribune. I wasn't aware that they were putting together this article. Um, and it was sent to me by Jeremy Munson this morning. Sorry, I'm trying to share it. And for those that aren't from Minnesota, the Star Tribune is like our far left leaning paper. It's the Minneapolis paper. It's the biggest paper. And it reads Republican support is broad for Iran war, but cracks show in Minnesota GOP. The tagline conservatives who connected with President Donald Trump in part because of his pledge to end forever wars fear the president is breaking his America First campaign promise by Walker Orenstein. This was available today, so I'm guessing it wasn't in the paper today. Maybe it'll be tomorrow's paper. It was available today at 6 a.m. So it starts with Mary Beth Hakomaki. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Backs President Trump's decision to bomb Iran and wants a governor of Minnesota who will support our president, but only up to a point. As Republican faithful filled the restaurant in Apple Valley to watch the GOP candidates for governor debate last week, the retired 70-year-old Burnsville said she opposed a ground invasion. I really don't want that to happen, Hakomaki said. I think we have the technology that we don't have to put boots on the ground. I'm sure you and I will discuss that in a bit. It goes on to talking about Jeremy Munson. Munson, obviously, a guy that's more aligned with our views, more libertarian-leaning conservative
mhm,
Republican. Um, so it talks about him, and then it actually brings up the show. It says, also in the anti-war camp is Jake Duesenberg, founder of Action for Liberty. By the way, Action for Liberty not affiliated with this position, just they're a state-issued group. Says a conservative group that frequently runs insurgent primary campaigns against sitting Republican lawmakers. Quote, we are now at war with Iran, Duesenberg said March 3rd on his podcast, Truth Hurts Show. And it's so crazy to even say that because the person that I voted for was very opposed to war, certainly made many statements against the new wars. It goes on to talk about Royce White's on our side on this issue. And then talks about, where did I miss it? Adam Schwarzy here we go. At least one Republican who previously railed against foreign intervention is now backing the president's actions in Iran and Venezuela. We took out the world's #1 sponsor of terror in 2 days, said M. Schwartzy, a candidate for U.S. Senate and combat veteran who served as a Marine and Navy SEAL. So knowing that he views it that way, I think it'd be really fun to hear. Now, this is the most fascinating part of this whole article. They go down the bottom and they interview this guy who's just I used to not care or not mind him so much, but he's just become I can almost consider him like a pest in the Republican Party. Just establishment adjacent. But his name is Frank Long, a 20-year Republican activist from Carver County who has held multiple roles in the party apparatus over the years and served in the U.S. Marine Corps during Jimmy Carter's administration, Rebecca. And so he's
That's a bit ago.
He's on the line with the talking points and it ends with Long said his friends that lean libertarian generally are against attacking Iran. Most of the guys who have been in the service have kind of the same view as I do because we know people have been over there, Long said. It's 1 degree of separation from somebody that has been lost to that regime. Okay. So
yeah, I read the article and I was just like, I've got so much going in my mind. Like, I was like, I don't think this is going to take like a quick thumbs up. I've got opinions. So,
well, what's so fascinating to me is I didn't know they were doing this article. They could have called me. The Star Tribune calls very frequently, wanting to hear a viewpoint on it. They just took just a random quote. I mean, I did shows on the reasons I'm against this war. In fact, I did a show on the top 5 reasons I'm against this war, but they just take some weird quote attributing it to me. But I don't know if they knew I'm an Iraq war veteran. I served 12 years in the military. I was an infantry officer. Like, I think I have some credentials here, and they take Frank Long, who to me just is establishment adjacent guy who served in the Carter administration, the military in the Carter administration, as like someone that knows what the veteran community thinks.
A lot has happened since Jimmy Carter. I'm just saying that there's people out there, like us, that are a lot closer attached to this situation. Iraq and Afghanistan were not that long ago. So,
I mean, we're not speaking for the whole veteran community, obviously, right? And I know veterans that are for it, but I communicate with people that are still in the military, and I can tell you they're not unanimously for this war at all. And I know a lot of them are very concerned about it. All right, so let's start there. I'm assuming your position on this stuff. You and I chatted on the phone yesterday. But what is your opinion on this war in Iran? I can't believe I'm saying those words right now, but the war in Iran.
Several weeks ago now, when all the Epstein stuff was coming out and the files and that was the big thing on everywhere, right? Was Epstein. And because we have our own podcast, and I made the comment on our podcast that something really big is going to happen to be able to distract people away from what is happening with Epstein. And literally 4 days later, I woke up 5:30 in the morning and my phone is just text messages of, oh, we started bombing Iran last night. It's like, well, that happened. That was a little faster than I anticipated, but this is such a foolish decision. I can't even, I'm not even sure I could find the right words to express just how foolhardy this is. They go into this. There's no exit strategy. There's no plan. They think that they're going to do this and they're going to be in and out like they were with Venezuela, which even that is debatable, right? Like what the long-term ramifications are going to be about Venezuela. And they think that the exact same thing is going to happen with Iran. And there's no way in no scenario was that actually going to be the case. So I don't know who their advisors were, but they had bad advice, bad intel. And then within the first 24 hours, one of the first hits they did was a school. And all evidence points back to that it was the United States military that did that.
Well, it's not just the evidence; it's actually something they've admitted, and of course they. And I think I've talked.
They tried not to. They tried brushing it under the rug, right?
I think that's important that actually Trump lied about this. And I was having this conversation with somebody last night. okay, I don't want to be just so anti-Trump, okay, but it's getting harder and harder not to be, all right?
Mhm.
Because here's my Christian values. I think telling the truth is important. There's a reason we called our show
Yep.
"The Truth Hurts." I understood in politics sometimes telling the truth is going to be hurtful for people. Right? This show might not be for you if you don't want to hear the truth. But when you hear me say something, I'm telling you what I believe to be true. But maybe I'm wrong down the road. But I
Mhm.
ain't telling you something I know is false because
Right.
I think that's incongruent with our Christian beliefs. And here I hear Trump time and time again, especially on war, lying to our face. They knew, the military knew exactly it was their Tomahawk missile that hit that school. By the way, they double tapped too. They hit it again.
Right. 40 minutes later.
Right.
That like that's enough time for everybody in the vicinity to come in and be pulling children's bodies out of rubble, and then they dropped a second one.
Well, and but we shouldn't, exclude this. It's like 160 young girls too, right? I think it were a school with children from military members, in Iran.
Mhm.
I think that's how it's been reported. But for Trump to come out and say that we don't know, that he is assuming or alluding to it being Iran that did it, which by the way, the evidence was a Tomahawk missile. So Iran doesn't
Mhm.
have Tomahawk missiles. That's a ridiculous statement. And then essentially just kind of excusing the fact, well, the study or the review by the Pentagon concluded it was us. And it's like, all right, we're moving on. It's like, that's pretty big deal. Now, I get it. In the fog of war, mistakes happen, but this is a war of choice. It's not like we were
Right.
attacked and it's a counterattack, right? And all of a sudden it was a mistake. And I do think it's important for us as American people to understand how this mistake occurred
Yeah.
because we should be 100% against the killing of innocent children. I think, aren't we? Aren't we all
I
supposed to be against
well, I am, like, and if it was look, if the tables were turned and let's just say Iran did that to us and dropped missiles on our schools, what do you think a normal person's American's reaction would be to that happening to our kids?
we're at war then, right? We were at
Rightfully
war.
so, we would
And you
be
just
angry.
radicalized me. Yeah, you just
Yeah,
radicalized me right there.
exactly. Yeah,
You
and
know,
then like they coming out and like have the audacity to complain that they're hitting military American military targets. I mean, well, what did you think was going to be the reaction when you like go in and like, bomb a highly dense population density area like Tehran's there's a lot of people there and there's no way that you're hitting, and I know that they're not just hitting military targets, right? There is a lot of Iranian civilians that even if they hate their government, right now it's they're having to choose between their bad government and the American missiles. This isn't how do you come like how do you like make a decision like that? And then if you were an Iranian, would you come out and say, "Oh, it's the Americans here, they're trying to save us?" No, that's not even logical.
right. Yeah, I mean some will because obviously there was resistance to the regime. And I can hear the moronic response on the right to what we're saying. Oh, you're pro Ayatollah. You're a
No.
sympathizer, a puppet for the Ayatollah. It's like, trust me, we are very much against the clerics of Iran. We're very much against a theocratic system, an Islamic theocratic system. There's nothing about us that supports that. But that doesn't mean this kind of action is merited because there is significant blowback. There's cost to America, by the way, not just in human lives, but also with $39 trillion in debt, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's God, I don't even know where to go from this point here, Rebecca. It's a regime change. It's a stop of nuclear weapons. It's opening up the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't seem like there's any consistent talking points on why we're at this war in Iran. And beyond that, it's a war that's not supposed to be unilaterally decided by a president. It's supposed to be declared by Congress.
Yeah.
And we can't
Well,
even
that's
get that
they
part
don't
right.
know what they're doing. That like I said, they had no plan. There's no exit strategy. They don't know what they're doing. I've seen what bad leadership gets you into. This has the red flags of bad leadership from top down. And this is what gets American soldiers, American airmen, Marines, like and then I read that they're starting to organize Marines to be able to the only reason that they would do that is because if they're planning on a ground assault, that just
Right.
seems that would be suicide. That's that's not trying to de-escalate, which is what they should be working towards, is de-escalating this, of which they unnecessarily started, but that's escalating the situation. The only scenarios that this ends with, everybody loses. We all lose, whether we're here or them there. I don't believe that without any sort of intentional de-escalation, that this war is going to just stay in Iran. This has every marker of us seeing something happen in the United States. Something.
Well, okay, so that's a really good point. It's almost as if we're driving Iran into the arms of Russia and China. And
Mm,
okay, so I was so much against the Ukrainian funding, right, which started under Biden.
yep.
And, before, anyone accuses me of being on the left, which is just a ridiculous claim, like, I was very vocally against all that under Joe Biden, under Barack Obama. By the way, Barack Obama, legitimately a war criminal, killed an American citizen in a drone bombing
I
overseas.
remember that.
Yeah, right? So, listen, I have got no love for those guys, no consistency on the left. But, the best I could tell from the Biden administration's policy on the Ukrainian war was they're trying to starve the beast of Russia, right? They look at Russia as a geopolitical opponent,
Mhm.
and they're gonna be in a quagmire, and we're gonna keep funding Ukraine despite how many people are gonna die from the funding, just FYI, but we're gonna starve the beast. And if you get past, like, the moral argument and even the legal argument of what we were doing in Ukraine, it makes sense to me. You try to starve this foe of yours internationally, ignoring all other bad parts of it, but you could understand, yeah, they're gonna end up expending a lot of their people and their resources.
Mhm.
We're doing the exact thing. We're giving Russia the same ability to do that to us in Iran,
Mhm. Yeah.
which
Well,
is
I don't believe that if Iran was smart, which I think they underestimated Iran and their willingness and their, I think that Iran also doesn't have good options. They're attacked, but so if Iran was smart, they would have already reached out to these countries like China and Russia. They would have already had this before they even got bombed this time, because remember, we bombed them in June. We bombed them in June where they were at the negotiating table with the United States trying to work out a deal, and we bombed them anyways.
right.
If I was Iran, I would have been like, you know what? Screw these guys. We're just going to go make our plan B. We're just not going to let anybody, it's going to be kind of, under the table. They would have made those phone calls. They would have got their ducks in order or ducks in row. Anyways, and they would have taken care of all that because they knew this was coming.
Mhm.
There's, if we knew that this was coming, they knew that this was coming.
So let me ask you this question. Because you're a Libertarian Party,
Mhm.
I assume you were not, you didn't vote for Donald Trump? I was gonna say supporter, but you didn't vote for
No,
Donald Trump? Okay.
I made a commitment to never vote major party again. And regardless of who it is on the ballots, I'm going to stick to that commitment.
Okay, gotcha. So I did, and the nice thing about having a show is my opinions are out there. It's very vocal.
Mhm.
I don't even really mind all those opinions I've had in the last couple of years. I feel like I've been very consistent, and despite Trump not earning my vote in many regards, the reason I did end up voting for him last November, one really big reason was because of this. I thought
Mhm.
he did seem to be the peace president. He did seem to have the interest of not having new wars. You could fault him for Iraq War 3, I guess is what we'd call it, the caliphate. Although by many regards seemed to be a successful operation, many different interventions, but not something like attacking a sovereign nation. It just seems like whatever those promises were and those statements that he made, including saying that like President Obama in 2012 needed approval by Congress, all of that is just gone to the wayside. Like, it doesn't even mean like it doesn't even seem like he said those things anymore. And what I can't figure out is why. I just can't figure that out. Like, was it just one big lie? Like, were people like you always like, oh, this guy's a joker. He's not being honest with people. He's saying what he thinks he needs to say to kind of maybe get some libertarians and pull them over to our side? Or is it something that maybe is a little more nefarious? Is it that he's really just not in control? Like Biden wasn't in control. I think we all understand Biden was not in control of the presidency. What do you think about that? I mean, like, it is puzzling because I'm sure you know his statements, which go
Mhm.
back well over a decade, was very anti-war, very much against starting new wars, very much against Middle Eastern wars, and very much against unilateral action by presidents.
Yeah, so he came to the National Libertarian Convention
Right.
and like did his spiel, got a lot of people on his side because he made all these promises. And it wasn't just the war stuff, it was, pardoning Ross Ulbricht, which he did. He did do that.
Right.
But, there were a lot of people that were wrapped up in the hysteria of the potential what the future held should
Right.
the Democrats become president again, right? Um, and so for that reason, I think that a lot of people were willing to give Trump some grace and room to be able to, oh, he said he's going to do these things. We're going to believe him that he's going to do these things. And I remember exactly where I was when I realized that all of that was false. It was the moment that he said, Epstein, are we still talking about that guy?
Yeah.
And I was
Right.
like, oh, he's compromised. Like he's compromised. They somebody, whoever it is, they have him, and he is no longer calling the shots.
Okay, so you did believe he was genuine in the
I
campaign
hoped,
trail?
man, I hoped he was, and
Well,
this
I
this
think
is
he
the way
was. He made a
I
convincing
approach,
case.
yeah. I mean, the way I approach all people is that I when they tell me who they are, like I want to believe them
Right.
because
Right.
I want to believe people are honest.
Right.
And this time around, it was just, I wanted to, but I also a lot of people did, and that's not what happened. I don't think there's a lot coming back from this. Like this is Trump was the guy that was supposed to be anti-establishment. He was going to be outside of the political oligarchy. He was going to be the guy that was going to, bring it all back together and make America great again. And that's not what's happening. That's not what happened. And so how do you come back from a betrayal, really, of that degree?
Okay, so this is a tweet that I was thinking about when we were having this discussion. So, and this is newsworthy. I'm going to read this to you here. So, this is Joe Kent today. Um, Joe Kent, who ran for Congress, was the director of National Counterterrorism Center, said today, after much reflection, I've decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. It has been an honor serving under POTUS and DNI and Secretary Tulsi Gabbard and leading the professionals at NCTC. May God bless America. There's his letter. Okay. Now, Karen Levitt
Mhm.
wrote this, okay? Just so people understand, I don't care how cute and spunky she is or any of these press secretaries, they are professional liars. Just so you know, that is their job, is to spin. It's a bad position. I could never do something like that because you're just being dishonest. Here's what she writes, because obviously the administration has to deal with this. This is somebody
Mhm.
inside the administration talking about how, what are you guys doing about this Iran war? This is ridiculous. They weren't an imminent threat. She writes, there are many false claims in this letter, but let me address one specifically, that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. This is the same false claim that Democrats and some in the liberal media have been repeating over and over. As President Trump has clearly and explicitly stated, he had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first. Okay. Then uh, Clint Russell, great Twitter handle, by the way, if you don't follow him,
Yes.
posted this, that just, I think it was some point last week, she wrote in response to the intel that the FBI gave that apparently Iran posed a threat to our western seaboard. She wrote, to be clear, no such threat from Iran to our homeland exists, and it never did. Okay, the reason I bring this up, Rebecca, is
Mhm.
I'm beginning to think that Trump is completely compromised, that he really has these genuine opinions against the wars,
Mhm.
and his hand is forced, and he's just doing a shitty job trying to sell this war because it's not his position in the first place. That's my read on it. Knowing nothing, not inside this administration, not close to this administration at all. Here I am, way across the country in Minnesota, not with any kind of inside information, but I just look at this guy and I go, how can you be so bad at lying? It's almost like you know you're lying and you don't even care how bad you're selling this war. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so maybe you're just lying because you kind of are forced to do it. And that's scary to me, by the way. That is, I mean, it's
Mhm.
not good that
Yeah.
he's lying and he's, lied to us about his position and then he's doing the opposite. So maybe maybe that's the better option, because this is a way worse option that he's actually not in control. Am I off the reservation on this? Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, there he yeah, I think he depends on, look, but President Bush spent more time trying to sell the Iraq war than Trump has tried to sell the Iran war. And that Iraq wasn't even that popular, so this is, I think he's going to have his hardcore MAGA followers that
Yeah,
are going to go along with it regardless of what he does.
it's
It
unfortunate.
doesn't matter what his decisions are. If they're good or they're bad, they're going to be fine with it because they're more wrapped up in Trump the personality than Trump the decision maker and what the results are of those decisions, right?
Right.
And they're not going to understand people like us who base what we believe off of principle and philosophy, and which makes us consistent regardless of who it is that's making those decisions.
Mhm.
Because they're like that, when we're like, oh, wait a second, I don't agree with that, they can't turn around and talk rationally because they don't understand the rational thinking, right?
Right.
So when Trump is making these kinds of choices, and it is very clear to me that he's not. I don't think he wants this. I think that his hand was forced, and he also, we're seeing this all play out in real time with global consequences, and
Right.
he
Bad
lost
ones.
control and he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a depressing thought, to be honest with you, and it almost makes people think, well, what's the point in voting if that's what we get anyhow, right?
Welcome to the black pilled club, man.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a
I don't, and part of the reason of voting for Trump was I didn't want to be in that jaded position. I wanted to have some hope and belief. Obviously, I had some differences opinion than Trump on stuff. I mean, mostly on finances, the finances of the United States. But you did believe he was going to be transparent. I didn't see that Epstein thing come. I thought he actually was going to be good on that issue. I was shocked that he wasn't good on that issue. And I thought he was going to be good on wars. I really did. I mean, I literally thought they tried to assassinate the guy. I didn't think it was like this lone guy that just woke up one day and decided I'm going to go shoot at the president and somehow got off of that many shots before he was taken out. Like that just doesn't. That just whole thing doesn't make sense to me. It seemed like it was a big setup to kill the leading candidate for president. But then I look at the stuff today and I'm just like, what, how do you explain this? It's so obviously a deviation from his promises. And I think it's really important that you said something here, that there are the cultists. I've
Mhm.
started to look at it this way. You do have the people on the left and the old right, they suffer from TDS, Trump derangement syndrome.
Oh yeah.
That's a real thing. Like
Mhm.
Trump can never do anything right. Okay. Here's how you know I don't suffer from TDS. Trump did a darn good job on the border. I am against what Biden did with an open border, and I think he did a good job shutting down that border. Okay. So credit where credit's due.
Right.
But there's another side of this thing, and it's on the right, and it's this like cult of personality where Trump can't do anything wrong. And they'll never
Right.
admit that, but they pretty much do.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's like crazy. Like that's almost worse because this guy, in my opinion, is doing things that are going to really hurt the United States of America. If you don't buy in that there's going to be significant blowback in this policy I ran, well, we are funding this to the tune of $1 billion. And last I checked, we are running about a $2 trillion budget deficit annually with $39 trillion already in debt
Yeah.
stacked up. Like that's going to hurt us financially, right? Now, let me bring this up to you as well. I think this is interesting for someone that's running in the third party. The Republicans, in my opinion, you know what? You have to be so bought into that Iran was a threat to you and me, which I can't believe people actually think that. That's so insane. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think like a month ago, people were so fearful that they had trouble sleeping at night because of the threat of Iran, right? But I know people that are worried about their budgets, their family budgets, their finances, that lose sleep over that. And guess what
Yeah.
happened in 1 week since attacking Iran? Gas prices have gone up 80 cents. Now, not just in the direct cost to us as consumers pumping gas into our car, is that going to cost us more?
Mhm.
If you're talking about a buck more a gallon of gasoline, I have a 20-gallon tank, $20 every time I fill up out of our pocket. That adds up every time. But what about all the consumer goods and services that go up because the people that need to transport that using gasoline or fuel, right? So
Yeah.
we are just putting more inflationary pressure on prices. And I think, boy, the biggest threat to America, if you're like me, is what the radical left is doing, destroying us within. And I'm pretty sure at this rate, the Democrats are going to just whomp the Republicans in the upcoming elections. Is that your read? Is that why another factor going into why you're running?
I think that honestly, I think it's going to be a bloodbath, and that did contribute to my decision for running because there are, um, like you said, you have the far right, like people who are gonna just they're gonna vote Republican no matter what happens, right?
Yeah.
But in Minnesota, we have a very large contingency of people who are not right or left. They consider themselves independent and moderate. They're the people that Trump really relied on to
Hmm.
be able to win this presidency because he swayed them to his side, right?
Hmm. Right.
He's not going to get that cushion. No Republican is as a result of everything that's going on because the Republicans in the federal, the Senate and Congress, they're going along with the exception of people like Thomas Massey and Rand Paul. The rest of them are just going along with whatever Trump wants to do.
Right.
I know that our Defend the Guard bill in Minnesota is dead in the water this legislative session because the Republicans are actively blocking it, which would have prevented using the National Guard in undeclared wars, right? That's the Republicans. This is on them. They're blocking that bill. And so you have a lot of people that are it's that betrayal that they thought they were voting for something. This is not what they're getting, and we're going into midterms. And I think that not only are we going to lose these seats that were swing seats to the blue side, but that also seats that you saw that were often historically deeply entrenched red are also going to be at risk
Yeah.
because that's how betrayed people feel. And they're not going to be the people are they're not going to be the ones that are feeling this, that are out there being like, oh, like I'm hurt and this kind of stuff. They're going to be the silent majority
Yeah.
that make this decision, and like they're going to go to they're looking for something else. I saw this a lot this last summer, even just strictly with like the Epstein things. A lot of people at our state fair booth were like, I used to be Republican. I used to be Democrat. A lot of Democrats actually in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time I saw it to this degree. A lot of Democrats that were like, I used to be a Democrat, but I can't do it with the Democrat Party anymore. I'm looking for alternatives.
Right.
Like, well, let me introduce you to libertarianism.
Right.
We like you to make your own choices, and we don't think the government should get involved. And you start out with that, and people are like, oh, really? That's the basis of all of it, actually.
Hmm.
And so I believe that there is room that if there was a time for a third party to drive a wedge between the two-party system, that now's the time, because you can't pretend that right or the left work for the common person anymore. They just
Right.
prop themselves up. And so, yeah, that had a lot to do with why I decided to go ahead and do this. It's a sense of duty Like, well, and you're once you have served, just because you're out, it doesn't mean that you don't feel a responsibility towards your country anymore.
Right.
Oftentimes, that responsibility evolves. And that's what it's done for me, especially now that I've got kids. Like, I'm
Right.
looking at what their future is going to look like. And I struggle with the kind of balancing that need for hope, but also reality, you know. And I'm doing this for them. I'm doing this for other people's kids, for the future. I can't just be like, we saw the problems that existed, and instead of working towards fixing it, we sat back and did nothing.
Right.
How can I say that to them? Like, that's I love them. I love my kids. I love your kids. Like, I want that for our future. But what we have going on now doesn't work.
Well, and I get accused a little bit more recently of just being so negative, and I think I'm negative because I'm opining on politics, and I think it's going the wrong direction, even under Trump, which is hard for some people to accept. But the direction I think it goes is a real beautiful way. The way that we libertarians, people that like liberty, conservatives, I kind of use those terms interchangeably, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
Um, is that we believe government is the problem, right? It's not the solution, and government needs to shrink. If it doesn't shrink, it's intruding our individual rights. And liberty is such a beautiful thing. It's so beautiful that it's something that I think is so sacred. It came from our creator, right? The
Right.
God who gave us life gave us liberty. And so, under a system where we respect liberty, which I think is what the founding of this country is, we put the onus, we put the responsibility on individual and the families. I really think of it in a family sense because I'm married and I have children like you. Um,
Mhm.
but not everyone is. So you think of yourself in an individual standpoint, or maybe even think as in terms of a community, which in a free society you can have associations with whoever you want freely, right? So whether you think individually, you think family wise, you think in the community, as long as that force of government isn't there, it's a beautiful thing. It's the best way to go about life. But the opposite, and this is what I see from obviously the Democrats advocate for it, and this is what the Republicans allow to continue to happen, is to have government come in and be the solution to everything. And it's really not
Yeah.
the solution, it's the problem. It's such a problem that they can't even manage their finances and they're adding more debt to it. But then you see these major problems where, like, well, you don't have anything that encourages people to be good parents and be good stewards of their own money because the government is coming in and taking care of you. And obviously, the government can't do that efficiently or effectively, and so it's kind of a ticking time bomb when it comes to the financial picture. And so I just think that's such an ugly picture, and that's what I'm always up against. And I think of all those problems with government, the worst is when we go to war because it's the health of the state. We have to fund more of this war. We have
Mhm.
to increase the size of government, right? We have to, and it could get to this point, we have to invade your liberties in the name of this war effort. I see that all happening, and I go, oh my God, this is 180 degrees from the beauty of the liberty movement, the thing that we are advocating for, the
Right.
thing that we want our kids to have.
Yeah. And well, the founders, they understood that wherever, and I think it was Ronald Reagan that said that we're only ever one generation away from, losing all of
Yeah,
this, right? But the founders understood that for us to be able to keep what they started, it was going to take a population that was involved, educated, and willing to be active about it. Like, you can't just sit back and be like, oh, somebody else is going to take care of that, because if everybody thinks that, nobody's taking care of it. And the people that are going to use these positions that potentially hold seats of power, the ones that are always going to be drawn to it are going to be the very worst people for those seats, right?
yeah,
And they're always going to use those seats in a way that props themselves up, absorbs power that they were never meant to have. That our founders, when they created our country, they never envisioned people having this kind of power. In fact, specifically, they warned against one person having the power to be able to
right,
engage in war, which is
right.
where we're at now. And so all of these things they warned about, but we're 250 years removed from those decision makings. Generations after generations have all been, not all of the people in these past generations. I can think of a lot of like big names, of people that were consistent with principles and warned what was happening and
Mhm.
did try to stop it. But
Right.
the majority nowadays is just out of touch. And so that's why it looks, when they see people like us that aren't out of touch, we know what's going on, we have the ability to speak on it in a way that's educated and clear. It really kind of throws people off. I have been very intentional about inserting myself, even being a libertarian, and there's nothing that's going to make me not a libertarian, right? Um, but intentionally inserting myself into very left leaning groups, because they don't, a lot of those people don't actually know what they believe.
Yeah.
They know what they're being told, but they've never been sat down and taught in a way that kind of explains, the history, where things are going to go with their, the policies that they're talking about, because a lot of these people live in that echo chamber, they surround. And so when you come in with something completely, different, um they they're actually quite open to listening, from what I've my experience. And so, and not everybody, like I've had, like
Yeah.
I've had those people that are just, they don't, they're not going to be open for good advice, right? But I have been, if we're going to take back not just our state but our country, those are the kind of people that you can't just unite the right.
Right.
You're going to have to convert the left. And that's where that culture has to change, is the people who are, um you know they're very committed to bad ideas. And so that's something that I've been very intentional about over the last couple of years, especially after, well, during running for office last time. But since then, I've done that throughout, so it's been 2 years now, almost. And talking to people about libertarian philosophy, libertarian values, why it's more beneficial for us to embrace those things versus things like socialism, communism. Did you know we have a fascist party in Minnesota? Um, I
No.
just learned that in the last week or two, that we legit have a Minnesota fascist party.
We
Also
have a
bad.
Socialist Rifle Association, so I guess why would
Yeah, I mean,
that?
like you have all these people that oftentimes we agree on what the problems are.
Yeah.
There's we can talk about Epstein, we can talk about the war in Iran, we can talk about the federal debt and the spending and the mismanagement. We all agree on those problems. Where we're going to disagree is the solution.
Right.
Uh, so that's one of the things that I've really been working on,
Well,
to
that's
the
great.
point where, like, I legit like went to an event with communists last week.
Oh, really?
I did. I went to an event with communists because, I mean, like, just have a conversation and get to know them as people. Uh, and I know there's probably some disagreement that communists are people, depending on which, group you're in. But, go and talk to them. We actually do agree on a lot of things. We just don't agree on the solution and the policies that would be the solutions. So those are the kind of people that, if you're going to save Minnesota, those are the kind of people that you have to change their thinking. And
There
for that reason, like, yeah, I talk to anybody about this, but
many years ago, we were doing the state fair, and some young guy comes up to me, and he wasn't about what we were doing. He goes, "I'm a anarcho-socialist," and I was like, "Okay, I know an anarcho-capitalist is," but I'm like, I'm intrigued. What does that mean? So he
Mhm.
explains to me this system of no government, but people live and basically provide goods for a commune. And I
Mhm.
go, well, I'm for that too. That's freedom. Like the whole point in socialism is you have a government force. That's what I'm against. I don't care if you want to take all the things that you produce and equally distribute it amongst the community you live in. I don't care. That is your choice. I'm just for freedom, man. It's like
Yeah,
maybe
as long as
there's
you're
more
not
people
using the government as a weapon to push your idea of,
right,
how people should live, do whatever you want. That's
right.
you got to make those decisions for yourself.
Yeah, just don't harm me.
Right.
Don't harm others, but, if you're not harming someone, you should be able to live that life, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember the last time I had you on, I can't remember what was on air or what we talked about afterwards, but I think my adoration for you is because of a conversation that happened off air, and I think it went real long, but we had a real heart to heart about your time in Iraq and all the things that you went through. Um I think people need to learn more about your history because I think it's really cool. It's really interesting. First of all, I was impressed that you're still standing on your 2 feet, just knowing what you went through. I mean, dead serious. Like, wow, that would have knocked most people out. Um, but like real briefly, just kind of give your story because we're very anti-war, but we actually
Mhm.
were over there. I was pretty close to the Iranian border. Southern Iraq is a Shia dominated area. So, I think we kind of know a little bit more than the average Joe. Not that you have to be you have to be in there, but it is important for those of us that have been there to know. Tell people about your history here with the military.
Oh, so I I joined the army before 9/11. Really, like when I joined, it was, I grew up in southern Mississippi. I didn't I didn't have the kind of background where like anybody was going to help me out with anything. Like I was, making my way through life with everything I had in my hands and by myself. And when you're 18 years old and you're doing that, there's not a lot of options, especially if you don't have money. And I didn't. What I did have going for me was that I was an athlete. I played soccer in college, and so I was very physically capable. I was a runner. Playing soccer is not an easy sport. And so I made the decision to join the army. And at that point, I was like, I didn't really, there was a whole lot of reasons why I should, and there weren't any reasons why I shouldn't. So I joined the army.
Mhm.
First job I looked at, yeah, the recruiter is like, well, what do you want to be? I was like, I want to be a medic. That was the only job I ever looked at. And it was like a decision. I said it. He was like, oh, I have one. I was like, perfect. I'll take it. It was that easy. I was probably one of the easiest people to recruit, really. Like I'd already made the decision of what I wanted to do before I went in there and did it. Right.
Wow.
And went to basic training, went to
Fort Jackson,
advanced
I'm assuming.
individual training. Yep, I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, did medic training in Fort Sam Houston and San Antonio. Got done with all my training in July of 2001. And then 9
We
11
we were the
happened.
same. Yeah, I didn't realize that we are like the exact same. That's been when I finished base training as well.
Yeah. So I mean, so I went after that. I went to no, 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 Fort Benning. That's where I went. So actually, if you were
Wish
in
we could have high fived.
I worked at the Troop Medical Clinic where IOBC and OBC and Airborne School, I worked there. So I probably crossed paths, and I was there for 2 years, 2002 to 2004. And so if you were there,
I could.
very likely I did
I,
your in processing.
I didn't get commissioned until '05, so I would have been IOBC
Okay.
in '05. So
Yep.
we would have
Well,
missed
I
each
worked on Kelly Hill too, or Sand Hill.
Sand
Well,
Hill.
Sand
Okay, well there you go. Well, but I would
Hill.
have
Yeah.
been. Well, I wouldn't have been in, I guess, again in 2002. So, yeah, maybe that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It
I
is a
know.
small world sometimes.
Yeah. So then after I was at Fort Benning, the Iraq War started. And I just, we'd been in Afghanistan for a couple of years at that point, and I had an opportunity to go to Korea, South Korea. And I had a former NCO that I worked with at Fort Benning and a former NCO that I was in medic school with. Both were in 2nd Infantry Division in Korea. And it was one of those really weird, like, it was just one of those moments where, like, oh, this is how things were just meant to work out, because this doesn't make any logical sense. I called the Department of the Army, and they were like, hey, we're sending you to South Korea. I wanted to go to 3rd ID, which was on Fort Benning, because they had orders to go to Iraq, and I wanted to go to Iraq. That didn't work out. I had like transfer orders to go to 3rd ID. And when I called the Department of the Army to be like, hey, I'm being transferred to 3rd ID on Fort Benning, they said, no, you're not. You're going to South Korea instead. And so then I was like, all right, I made the connection between those two NCOs who were already in 2nd ID in Korea. And they went and talked to whoever it was they had to talk to there, and left a slot open so that I could slide into 2ID in a medic slot, because they had orders to go to Iraq. So I ended up in Iraq anyways.
Can I
Just
ask this
the
question?
3rd ID, the 2nd ID.
Were you a proponent of the war at that point?
I was in the Army, and I believed, I had a very strong national, like, just, duty
Yeah.
to our country. I was also very young. And,
Okay, but
when you're young, you don't look into things,
I know, but
or
the reason I asked that question is because I was too, right? Politically, I was politically motivated, bomb Saddam, kind of stuff like that. And yes, I chalked it up to being young, and maybe part of the voice I have right now is because maybe I can open some people's eyes up to not being duped like I was when I was young, because I see a lot of the same things happening, a lot of the same
yeah.
bullshit propaganda used to sell a war that's not really in our interests. So I think we're actually pretty normal veterans who are very much against this. At one point, were for it, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I grew up the first Gulf War, so it's not like talking about Iraq was new.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, shortly went to South Korea, then ended up in Iraq, and with 2nd Infantry Division. And then it started to get very real very, very quickly,
Mhm.
because when we went to Iraq, we went to Ar Ramadi. Ar Ramadi is in the Al Anbar province. It's just outside of Fallujah.
Mhm.
And that was when all the stuff in Fallujah was happening, right? Like dragging civilian contractor bodies through the streets. We were attached to Marine divisions, second Marine Div, the first 6 months, it was first Marine Div and second Marine Div, but they only have 6-month deployments. So we were there for both of, that switch. And within the first couple of days of being in Iraq, we had already taken our first casualties, and it never slowed down. By the time we left Ramadi, Battle of Fallujah had happened. I think that was in December of 2004. We set up the casualty collection points, and we were ready for mass cal coming out of Fallujah, depending on how it went. But Ramadi was just as hot as Fallujah was, just as hot. And by the time we left, 2nd Infantry Division, 2nd Brigade Combat Team had the most casualties that any brigade combat team took for both theaters of war for the entire 20 years. And that was us.
Mhm.
And when you're a medic, first of all, there's like 40 women and like an infantry brigade, like there's not very many of us, 4,000 people. So a lot of people knew who we were. I didn't necessarily know, we had our friends and people that came by often. But people were more likely to recognize us than I was them. Everybody looks the same in DCUs, and when, you're covered in
Yep.
dirt and sweat. But we had battalions that just, we had the radios, and we could, when casualties were coming in, we'd be on the radio and we knew they were coming. And it was never not somebody that we weren't so far removed of that it wasn't personal,
Right.
And major things that happened. I did aid station duty on the evac team, but the other duties that the evac team had was being support for the infantry battalions, for the engineer battalions, the artillery. So I wasn't just in an aid station. I was also out in the city, setting up the casualty collection points, doing, backup for these different, whatever their mission was, cache sweeps, going through the city and like setting on out cordons and, looking for certain people. We set up the support for that, not inside the fob. um, Oftentimes what that meant is that it just something always happened.
Mhm.
There wasn't very often then, it was just a nice easy mission. That wasn't our situation in Ramadi. um there were a lot of big things that still, like, I don't know, you never know when it's going to come back, and all of a sudden you're, there again and you're thinking about it. But there's a few incidents that's just never not right there, especially the ones that involve kids. um those were the hardest.
Mhm.
um so went and did that in Ramadi. Did I didn't have enough fun the first year, I guess, so I re-enlisted. um Went back to same
By the way,
brigade.
they had nice bonuses back then too, right? They lured a
Yeah,
lot of us people that didn't come from wealthy families and sign in.
yeah, mine was like, I think I got like $8,000 to
But
re-enlist.
that was like a lot of money when you
That
think
was a
about it.
lot of money when you're not accustomed to having a lot of money.
Plus, you got that deployment money, that wasn't taxed, and it's just sitting in that bank account. You come back, I
Yeah.
don't know what it was like for female soldiers, but us guys, we wanted that new vehicle or that crotch rocket.
I bought a motorcycle. That's what I
All right,
did.
there you go. That happened to girls too.
Yeah, it was a Honda CBR. It
There
was
you go.
cherry apple red. That's what I spent my reenlistment money on for sure. So yeah, and then we did home for about a year. Instead of sending us back to Korea, they sent us to Fort Carson, Colorado, which is amazing.
Yep.
Colorado is an amazing state,
Yep.
and I really enjoyed my time in Colorado. We did NTC training. We did a lot of field training because we knew we were going back. And so we went back to Iraq in Baghdad in 2006. That was September of 2006, October, somewhere around there. And it wasn't, honestly, it wasn't different than Ramadi because things had changed. The rules of engagement had changed, warfare had changed.
Mhm.
So in Ramadi, we had a lot of incidences with snipers. I got some pretty interesting stories about snipers that we had in Ramadi that they weren't even Iraqi, they were Chechnyan. And then, but in Baghdad, it wasn't just IEDs and snipers. They had a new kind of roadside bomb that was EFP, I think is what it was called.
Yep.
Yeah, because they had the facility to be able to make, for oil drilling, to like these copper discs, they put an explosion or explosive behind it, and then use these copper discs because by that time, our first deployment, we didn't have up armor on our vehicles.
That's right.
We
Yeah. That
had
was a big
bags.
political issue.
Yeah, we literally drove into Iraq with canvas doors on our vehicles
Well, that's
when
what
we
Humvees were designed to do. They weren't designed to be armored
yeah.
vehicles, right? So
Yeah, so our first deployment, no up armor on our vehicles. Our second deployment, things had changed. We had Kevlar doors, we had, combat glass windows.
mhm.
And so, because of that, warfare evolved. And they had these new roadside bombs that could overcome the Kevlar on our side of our vehicles.
Right.
And those were catastrophic if
Yes.
your vehicle got hit. They were absolutely catastrophic. Um,
We were led to believe those were Iranian made, by the way.
well, the factory for those copper discs was in Baghdad.
Right. Yeah, that's
That's
been
where they were made.
that was actually pressured by the U.S. media when the White House made those statements. I just got reminded of that by Scott Horton, who did some work on this.
Mm,
Um, so that those were actually that was false. I mean, you could say it was lies. Who knows? It was just false intel that was shared with it. I
yeah,
do believe down south we were rocketed all the time
yeah.
with Iranian rockets. That's what was sold to us. Now, once again, I keep saying sold to us because I wasn't gathering intel firsthand, but that is more believable because those things were set up in such a terrible timing device on just makeshift pipes. And so, yeah, they're probably ancient or old rockets that weren't even being used by the Iranians anymore that came across the border. That's believable.
Yeah, well, I did. So my first deployment, I did a mission where we went out with the engineers, and again, it was for medical support. But this mission that we did was western, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, western Iraq, close to the Syrian border, actually.
Wow.
And when we went out there, I'm going to try to like explain what this was because visually it was extraordinary. There were these bunkers, and when I say bunkers, they were probably 2 to 3 football field sizes,
Hmm.
half buried under the sand and then covered with sand on top. All you could see from the air really was just that there were smokestacks for airflow coming out on one on either side of these bunkers. Big steel doors in the front, and on the inside, once we got there, they were completely empty. There were shelves where things had sat and where things had been stored, but every single one of those bunkers were empty, and there were hundreds of them.
Hmm.
As far if you went and climbed on top of those, because you could, it was just like a sand dune over the top. You could see for as far as you could see all the way around these bunkers that are just like I said, 2 to 3 footballs easily, at least that size. That's how big they were on the
And they're
inside.
just out kind of in the random like desert area. That's
Yeah, they were just in a desert area and fully empty by the time we got there.
interesting.
The
Okay.
ground on the outside, though, was littered with fuses, just billions everywhere. You kind of had to be careful where you stepped,
Hmm.
because while we're out there trying to find stuff and clean up stuff, and then EOD is out there with us too. So once enough is found, they put it into a pile and blow it up.
Sure.
But we found unexploded 500-pound bombs out there. We found a lot of things that could be made into explosives. I believe that Iraq had a lot of stuff at their disposal, and I mean the question is, who has it now? Where did it go? Because
Right.
all of those were full of something. I think that it's very real that they went to Syria. The first deployment, we had people go and do rotations on the Syrian border to try and stop some of that flow of stuff that was coming in and out. But I mean, this is they had things. So I don't know necessarily if they needed help from Iran when they had their own stuff. So,
Well,
and
I'm
Iran and Iraq haven't always been allies either. They haven't always liked each other.
right,
So,
but of course, we installed basically a Shia government, so an Iranian allied government, but that's not even what I'm saying. I'm saying the area I was in, which was quite a ways away from that, was a tribal Shia area, right? They
mhm,
think more tribally than we were probably used to in America, and so they're more Iranian adjacent, I guess is the
mhm,
best way to put it.
yeah.
But I'm not saying that the Iranian regime, because it seems like that's one of the tropes here in this current propaganda campaign is that, well, we've been at war with these guys for 47 years and they've killed more American service members than anyone else. And I think that's loosely stated.
Well, there's no way to actually prove that either.
It really
That's
isn't. Yeah.
something you can say, but everybody's like, "Well, where's your proof?" Well, it's they don't have it.
Well, I just think like the reason I want to maybe emphasize this point was that, maybe we should be the ones that are supposedly the most upset with Iran because, we've been attacked by Iran according to the propaganda here. I started wearing this recently. This was given to me. This is a little cross. This was given to me by Sergeant Major Thomas Behrens, Sergeant Major retired Thomas Behrens. He's the guy that replaced Tim Walz when Tim Walz abandoned his troops to go on a deployment to Iraq. And this is made out of material from an Iranian rocket, which I think is so cool. Once again, we're not the intel gatherers. That's what we believe. It was an Iranian-made rocket. Not saying Iran was rocketing us, but that they would put these things on timing devices and launch them at us, which I think is kind of a nice little FU. Is like, you can get us, and here we're going to make this into something cool, like a cross, right? So it seems like we should be the ones that are so for this war, but I do find it interesting that, like, a lot of us kind of understand how much of a quagmire the Middle East is,
Yeah.
and that regime. Like, I was explaining this to someone today. Regime change wars in the Middle East never work for us, and we just literally replaced the Ayatollah, an 86-year-old man, with his son, who's younger. Like, it was
And
Khomeini.
by all accounts, more radical.
Yeah, maybe, possibly, right?
Mhm.
And then the dad's going to be a martyr, right? So, and we killed a religious leader, which is insane to boot. So it just seems like, well, this didn't really accomplish anything, right? And
Right.
we're not toppling a nation of 90 million people, Ted Cruz, and the fourth largest military in the world, right? With tons of missiles and also maybe a more unified country to some degree, in the sense that we killed their leader, and we also committed a huge war atrocity. Could have been a mistake. I hope it was a mistake, but still killed 160 school children. It just seems to me that this is so obviously not going to go very well for us. And I think that's going to be my last question I have for you, because I know we're over an hour, is I do think it's maybe many of us veterans are a little bit more sensitive to the fact that this thing's going to grow into something way worse and be another quagmire like Iraq was, right?
Yeah.
Is that the way you see it? And if so, you're a U.S. Senate candidate. What do you do? How do you combat this? What is your approach?
My approach to the foreign policy, the way that I would do things, would be complete non-intervention. Like if a country like Iran is having problems, it's got to be up to them. If they're a sovereign nation and we want people to recognize our sovereignty, then we have to recognize other people's sovereignty too. Their own people have to be able to figure out how to fix their own problems. We can't come in there as a basis of foreign policy and blow up their kids and think that we're winning hearts and minds, right? In fact, what we're doing is that we're creating the next generation of radicals to hate us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are like, "Oh, what Iran's chanting death to America," like, yeah, but have you seen what we've done to them? Like, what would you do if they came here and did that to us? Wouldn't you also be angry? Like, I try to put myself into just, a fellow human's shoes, regardless of within whose borders they live in, and approach it from that way. The best thing the United States could do, especially considering how many enemies that we've made globally, we bring everything home. We pack it all up. We bring it all home. We are not the world's police. We don't have the financial resources for that. We don't have the manpower for that. Mm-hmm. We ask so much for our active duty military, and we're putting a very large responsibility on a very small portion of our population, because we're a volunteer army, and that's the way it should be, right?
Right.
We got to live within our own means. So pack it all up, bring it home, close the borders right now. And, there's that libertarian debate on open borders versus closed borders, I think, is for another day, especially if you have a potential enemy at your gates. We need to make sure that, we're protecting our people here. That's the government's, maybe their only job beyond the roads, right? So
We
our
should have a Department of Defense to defend our country, not a
yeah,
Department of
not a
War to
Department of
go.
War.
Right,
If we're going to only engage in war after we've been attacked, we have to actually be attacked first.
right.
We can't just see enemies everywhere and be like, oh, well, they were going to. Yeah, but did they? Like, just because somebody talks about, not liking the United States or another country's like, hey, we should attack them,
Mhm.
until they actually do that, that they haven't committed an offense against us.
Or the
And the
intel
best,
is so overwhelming that you sell that to Congress and Congress weighs in,
yeah.
right?
I mean,
'Cause
if we're
obviously
gonna like commit,
we wouldn't wanna
yeah,
be
we're gonna, sorry.
well, we wouldn't
If
wanna be attacked first, obviously, if we had good intel, but the problem is 'cause this is one of the I like to take I like to try to argue against my positions, and I have that same viewpoint as you, but, obviously, we don't wanna be attacked. We don't want our citizens being harmed, and so it's like, well, how do you counter that? And it's like, you really have to sell it to Congress because and that's not perfect. I'm not making any
Mhm.
I'm not trying to say that Congress is perfect or anything like that, but it's just that we've been lied to so much that I just can't trust you guys anymore telling us that it's an imminent threat,
Right.
right?
Well,
You're
and
gonna have
that's
to at least if it's because it's classified info and you can't share it with us, you're gonna have to sell it to Congress at the very least. I think that's still problematic, but it's better than just a unilateral decision. Because
well, and that's
otherwise,
also why
I think
just
you're lying to us, and you'll lie into us that there's an imminent threat, and there really isn't.
yeah, that's also why seeing building up our defenses at home is has to
Right.
absolutely be part of this. Is that, we know that there are people that given the opportunity that they would not respect our, our borders, our people, that they would come and try and attack us.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of human history. I mean, that's not even like something that's different. That we have a long written history of one country attacking another country. Our best offense against that is a good defense,
Okay,
right?
last question then. Alright. Do you think that's a higher risk now than it was before March started? Because I do. I'm beginning to think that the risk
Yeah.
to our homeland is higher than it was prior to this action I ran, but I could be off on that. What do you think?
If I was an Iranian leader and I knew that this was our scenario, and that United States has a history of being like, hey, we should negotiate, and then bombing us while we're in the middle of negotiations. And then now they're dropping missiles on our people and our kids. Um, the, if I was them, I wouldn't be just fighting a one front war. They wouldn't, I wouldn't just be defending ourselves, but I would be going after the heart of whoever it was that has attacked us. Because
Right,
that's the only way to actually make it stop, right? Is
right.
that the United States
Well,
doesn't
it
have,
could make it worse, though. It could draw us into because just think about this, if, let's say, they activated sleeper cell and committed a mass casualty event in the United States, I could see that also being the war drums that they needed to actually put
yeah,
boots on the ground in Iran. So
there,
that
there
actually
are no good scenarios
right,
right now with what we have going on. There is,
right.
there isn't, there is not a path forward in which we win.
And, Iran did commit a act of terrorism against,
Mhm.
American service members in Beirut, obviously, in, what was that, '84? But the
Yeah.
response wasn't to actually uh, engage in this large scale war against Iran. In fact, some people criticize Ronald Reagan for it, but I almost think that was a better response because I think more deaths occur, right?
Mhm.
Okay, that's all the time I got with you. I
We
want to
didn't
have
even
you
talk
back
about
on.
ballot access next time.
What's that?
We didn't even talk about ballot access. So next time.
Oh yeah. Well, let's real quick the ballot access point. I'm glad you brought that up. Because the Libertarian Party is not a major party status,
Mhm.
you don't just automatically get on the ballot. So explain to people what needs to happen.
So the one thing that the right and the left in office can agree on is that they don't like competition, right? So
Right.
they created laws to keep minor parties off the ballot. And in Minnesota, you have two groups of people. You have the major parties, them, And then you have everybody else who are minor parties. To be able to get onto the ballot, if you're a major party candidate, all you have to do is fill out a form and write a check. It's a couple $100. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to get it turned in, according to their dates or whatever, so that you're on the primary. If you're a minor party candidate, to be able to get on the ballot, you have 2 weeks starting in May. I think it's May 19th this year. And you have to collect 2,000 signatures per statewide candidate to be able to successfully get on the ballot. Now, we did that fine for myself last time around. I think we turned in 2,400, something like that, within the 2 weeks. But you can see if you're running governor, auditor, secretary of state, attorney general, U.S. Senate, all of those are considered statewide races. That's 2,000 signatures per candidate, not per party. It's per candidate. So now all of a sudden we're up to 10,000 signatures in 2 weeks' time. And that doesn't even include the House of Representatives, the representative, candidates for minor parties, Senate. So if you want to run for in CD1 as an independent or as a libertarian, it's 1,000 signatures per race, per candidate. For representatives, it's 500. And what we have, how many representatives in Minnesota? 87, 80, no, wait, it's more than
134
that.
reps.
Yes, thanks. So if we were going to actually have somebody running in every single district as a minor party candidate, it's you can see how like the signatures add up very, very fast, and we still only have 2 weeks to get all those done. So that's kind of where our major hurdle isn't even one of being able to like get on the ballot and to run a competitive race. It's simply being denied access to even being on the ballot in the first place, because they create hurdles for us that they don't create for themselves, right? And in fact, this is how far that hypocrisy goes, is that there is an option for major party candidates to petition so that they don't have to pay the couple $100 to get on the ballot. They can petition in place of paying the money, but they have 6 months to get all those petitions and signed out and get all those names. Versus us, who only have 2 weeks. So like that window is super arbitrary, and it is intentionally done just to make sure that their political monopoly is never at risk, never at real risk, right? So that's what we're working on organizing right now. So if you're like, have anybody that's watching that's like, hey, I'm all in, I want to do this, man, reach out. We need boots on the ground here. And we need
boots on the ground.
Yeah, boots on the ground in Minnesota.
I never thought on this show, the title that we have, Rebecca was going to say we need boots on the ground, but she just said it.
Yeah.
One other thing before I let you go.
Die hard.
One other thing before I let you go. I am speaking at your guys' convention, the Libertarian Party's convention in Owatonna on March 28th, I want to say it was, right?
Yep, our convention is 28th and 29th.
Right before Scott Horton, which will be great. Yep. I got a good idea on how I can transition what I'm going to be talking about into Scott Horton. So stay tuned if you guys are attending. I think I'm going to have an interesting approach. As a guy that's considered a small L libertarian, I've never been part of the Libertarian Party, but I like the Libertarian Party people, maybe somewhere down the road we could have a discussion on if that makes sense to be a part of the LPMN. But at the very least, I think it's good to have options. And, you're my front runner right now as a candidate. I really want to have that conversation with Adam Schwarzy, have him on the show with you. I think that'd be really cool because the three of us have been overseas. And so it'd be fun to see how we diverge on our viewpoints. Start Tribune and make it seem that we do. So it'd be really interesting to have that conversation. And I guess Royce White is against this Iran war, so that's good. I need to have another conversation with Royce White, but boy, if I do, we're going to talk a little bit about Steve Bannon, so that'll be an interesting conversation.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. All right. Rebecca, where could people find out more info about you?
About the LPMN, lpmn.org. I think I have a website. I don't actually know the name of my website off the top of my head. Google it. Rebecca Whiting for U.S. Senate. Sorry. And then I'm on Facebook. You can look me up there. I'm also on X. Look me up there. I don't actually do much on X, so it's not. Facebook's kind of. I'm a little more lean that way towards boomers than with the social media stuff. So it's not my strong point. But
Gotcha.
yeah, definitely on Facebook.
Well, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And this show is brought to you by Alpine Cabinetry in the great city of St. Cloud, Minnesota. It's also brought to you by Elite Guardian, mn.com. Once again, I'll just show you real quick. You can go to eliteguardianmn.com. You just click on Minnesota Permit to Carry class, and there's a bunch of classes we got coming up. You have two options. You can either do the 4-hour in-person class at the range, or you can sign up for a virtual class, which is just 2.5 hours. They're both on Sunday night, 6 to 8:30 p.m. And then you'll find time. You'll have a lot of options of when you could come do the in-person pistol shooting and training. So, that's eliteguardianmn.com. I'll be live on the post show here in 30 seconds. I was going to say 5 minutes. I'm not going to take a break. We'll be live on the post show. That's for all our premium insiders. I saw there's so many people in the comment section. I figured I'd rather stick to the conversation and not get distracted too much. So I apologize. Oh, it looks like Nick Duggar says it's Whiting for Senate.us. Okay. You'd think the candidate would know that, but she didn't. Just shows her humility, I guess, right? So you guys can if you want to be a premium insider, make sure you click on join us on Rumble. Otherwise, you can go truthhurtsnews.com. You can do this after the fact, and you get access to our post show and some special content. Really helps support the show, keeps us independent. We'll be live in 30 seconds for everyone else. I don't know if I'll do a show on Thursday. It is my kids' spring break. We did reach out to Patrick Knight to have a conversation. He's a gubernatorial candidate. Have not heard back. So I'm not so certain about Thursday. Plus, I'll just put it this way. My Wisconsin Badgers, I have two teams in the NCAA tournament every year, my Badgers and my Iowa State Cyclones, both looking really good going into the tournament. And the Badgers do play at about showtime, so that's tricky. That's a tricky one. But if we get the interview, we'll do the show on Thursday because I think that's more important. So anyhow, if I don't see you on Thursday, we'll see you next Tuesday. And for our post-show subscribers, we'll see you in 30 seconds. Bye-bye.